All right, in a violent nature. Well, movie definitely has the title for it. Okay, so I've been hearing about the movie thanks to social, and it looked interesting, so I put it on my watch list and then waited for it to drop on Shudder. And when it finally did, I watched it and was really, really surprised on how much I actually liked this one. So this one, it's the typical like slasher like movie. It feels much like a mixture of something like Friday the 13th, where it's in like the woods, like the backwoods, stuff like that. And also Halloween, where the killer doesn't talk, moves very slowly, and it feels like a mixture of that. What this movie does differently is it's shot completely in like the third person view of a killer. So it very much feels like there was a Rockstar game, Manhunt, where you're playing a killer and you're just going around just killing people. It kind of feels like you're playing like a Friday the 13th spin-off of that. But it's like completely, shot like in third person. So it was really interesting and really cool to see that happen, because I'm like, okay, so it's like, you're watching the killer go, because in the typical like Friday the 13th film, you have, you see kind of like Jason there, you kind of do, and then, he just pops in like randomly, and it's going like, no, what if, Jason, is there, and then instead of the teenagers running off and then we focus on them, it just focuses on Jason walking to them and like almost planning out his like moves and tactics. It feels like that, which I thought was really cool and kind of refreshing too, because I was kind of going into this going, is that the only new thing that they're going to do with this? And it's not. So the story of this one is, it's very basic. It's, this, throughout the movie, yeah, they explain the backstory of the killer, but the killer is actually dead and, has a necklace that he needs to be buried with. And then some people come along, they take it, and then the killer rises and starts chasing them down, and which then results in more people getting axed and slashed and all that fun stuff, I guess. But throughout the movie, it lets you know the backstory of him, and it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. Like, it's like I said, the main plot, it's very much like, okay, so he's risen and now he's going on a rampage. Okay, it's typical like kind of killer slasher thing that we've seen in the last like 40 years now. But the fact that the movie does it in third person makes it different, but also this one does the people in it, the people that, for most of the time they're getting slashed, they're not like the typical like slasher victims that we've seen in a lot of different slasher films, like the Friday the 13th series, like the Halloween series, where they're just like, hey, I'm bored, let's just go have sex. They all they care about is sex. They're stupid and they want to drink, they want to get high, all that stuff. In this one, not really, actually not at all. They're not fully stupid, but it's that common, like, like dumb, normal mistake. But compare that to something like Friday the 13th, where they're just idiots. They do the typical, I'll be right back, that we've seen in a whole bunch of other horror movies. This one, it's like they make dumb, normal mistakes. And it's very rare, which I liked. It was a nice breath of fresh air. And it's just like they're just giving each other, a hard time. It's that kind of friendship. So I liked that. Also, the gore, while it comes in bits and pieces here and there, is pretty heavy. It is pretty gory heavy. It's not something like Terrifier, where it's just blood and gore painted all over the walls, and it's just like, no, I'm not getting into this personally. This one, it's like, I don't want to say it's more like realistic type stuff, but it does feel like, something we would kind of see in like a Friday the 13th film, but a little bit more leaning towards like if Jason took some advice from Jigsaw. It's that kind of thing. So yeah, if you're not into gore, don't watch this. Or you probably haven't seen any of the Friday the 13th films. But I also have to say the cinematography, the fact that it is in third person, is very impressive. It looks like they planned. It feels at times like it was painstakingly planned on some shots, while some shots felt like they just went like the day of and just said like, hey, what if we get a shot over there, and like over on that cliff, we just set up a camera right there so you could just see a whole like wide shot of like, you see one side of a cliff and then you see the river and then you see the other side. They just were like, why don't we just do that? So it really feels like at times they just were going like, all right, it needs to be this way. We need to make sure it goes like this. When at other times it felt like they just had one camera and just went, hey, just go over there, get a quick shot real quick, and we'll see if it fits. It felt like at times they're filming a bunch of B-roll that actually managed to blend into the movie seamlessly. Seemingly, I can't talk. It's screw it. So I really like that. Now, this can be a bit slow. It is a bit slow at times. And also, I've seen a lot of people compare it to something like Skinamarink, where the way it's filmed, where with Skinamarink was more of the camera shots were focusing on objects and like like a bedroom roof or like a window or like the couch or the TV. And that's what it was using to tell a story. And I personally, I thought it was interesting, but for a lot of people, it was boring. And I can see that. So this is definitely something like on the lines of something like Skinamarink, where I can't really recommend it to everybody because it is not a movie for everybody because of the way it is filmed. Personally, I liked it. So I personally don't give it a knock, but I would say like, if you get bored by like, if you saw Skinamarink and you got bored from that, this one you probably won't be as bored, but you'll still have a little bit of that boredom in there. So just telling you that now. But, overall, this is one of those movies that is just it's so simple that you're honestly kicking yourself on not thinking about the idea first. Like you're just like sitting there watching going like, why didn't I think of this? And, because a typical slasher is that it's it's the typical, just like, it's a backwoods killer, and stuff like that. This goes, okay, there is, but let's add a different angle to this. Instead of telling it from the story of, like, the babysitter, or the camp counselors, or the teenagers, the sex party, drug-fueled, alcohol drinking teenagers. This movie goes, what if we told it from the point of view of the killer? Like, it's them going through it. Almost like something like, going back to something like from the 80s, like Maniac, where the villain of that movie was the killer, and they were the main character. They were in every scene. So it feels like something like that. So it's like, why don't we take something like Maniac, mix it in with something like Friday the 13th? And this movie does it very well. If they did greenlight a sequel, which I will definitely check out. So I would say this is a great. I was fairly surprised on how much I actually liked this movie. If you want a slasher, but you want a little more nuance to it, this is a good one to go with. So, like I said, it took me generally by surprise on how much I actually liked it. So, if you like Friday the 13th films, or even like something like Maniac, this is kind of an amalgamation of the two. Or if you want a slasher film, but you want a little more like nuance to it, it's not on the same boat as something like Cabin in the Woods, where that film played it like it was a typical Cabin in the Woods film, but there's so much more to it. This one, it's not on the level of that, but it was going like, let's take like the Friday the 13th and put a little spin on it. This does that. So, like I said, if you like slasher films, you'll like this. If you don't like Skinamarink, I don't think you'll hate this movie, but you probably will get a little bored. But personally, I really enjoyed it, and yeah, when the sequel comes out, I will definitely be watching it.
Animals don't get too hung up on reason. They just keep killing.